We now have an interactive workshop hosted by 5 of our mafiosos, 4 mafiosos and 1 of our volunteers. This is a 30-minute workshop on climate policy, crafting climate policy. Yeah, the next 30 minutes are yours, guys. I believe they've designed it in a way where for 15 minutes we go through a climate policy workshop. And then we're going to have 15-minute breakout rooms with each of them. So you can actually choose your room for media, for a government stakeholder, and 2 other stakeholders. And all of us will have the option of going into one room or the other. So the next 30 minutes are about an issue that we normally don't consider is within our grasp, unless we are researchers or we are heavily involved in the policy crafting space. But in this session, Hari, Rohan, Radhika, Arundhati, and Manjunath are going to demystify what climate policy actually means and how we can make it part of our toolkit.
Hey, a warm good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the Crafting Climate Policy Workshop. My name is Rohan Suresh. We have a participation of roughly 80 people joining us. Thank you so much for taking your time out. So let's discuss what is this session all about. We have a fun, exciting, interactive 30 minutes lined up for you. We'll try to give you a brief overview of what exactly is environmental policy and what role policy has to play in protecting our environment and our fight against climate change. Who are the different stakeholders in policy making and what are their roles? We'll try to give you the past. We'll try to also talk about the past and current EIA draft and who is impacted by it. It's been in heated debate for some time now, as we all know. Later, we have an interactive role-playing session where everyone will try to answer questions from viewpoints of different stakeholders. Lastly, we talk about what is your role, that is the citizen, Janta Janardan, basically. And do you have a say, or do you have a say in policy making? Awesome, let's get started. So what is environmental policy? Environmental policy is the commitment of an organization or government to the laws, regulations, and other policy mechanisms concerning environmental issues. And any decision made under these policy will affect us all as the citizens. And environmental policy becomes even more important in a world facing global warming and climate change. Let's launch the poll now. Can we launch the poll, please? Okay, let's share the results. I can see, I think a majority of you feel that government is the major stakeholder in any policy framing. And secondly, it's you, the citizen. And third comes roughly the industry. And maybe media doesn't have a role, or maybe scientists have the most little role. That's some interesting perspective out there. Let's try to demystify this and understand this further. According to us, these are the different stakeholders, or the most important stakeholders in any policy framing. The government, public, that is the citizens, NGOs, vulnerable groups, industry, scientists, and media. Yes, media does play a very important role also. Let's try to understand the much debated EIA draft, that is the environmental impact assessment. Over to you, Radhika.
Thanks, Rohan. So thanks, Rohan, for giving an overview of our activity and what we're going to try and achieve here. So as an example of a policy, we're going to take the environmental impact assessment, and I'm sure most of you have heard of this, but I'm just going to go through the next 3 slides and just to give a brief on what is this policy all about. So this is an EIA is a process to evaluate the environmental impact of any proposed project, and it comes under Section 3 of the Environmental Protection Act. The EIA has been delegated to the Ministry of Environment and Policy, MOEFCC. What does that mean? So, Rohan, next slide, please. So typically, policy is created by a ministry introducing a bill in Parliament. The Parliament approves. The ministry drafts a bill, public comment. Then the ministry finalizes the bill, presents it in the Parliament, and there's a parliamentary approval process before the bill is made into law. But the EIA is a delegated legislation. So what does that mean? The parliament is completely taken out of the picture. So the ministry drafts a bill, goes into public comment, and the ministry finalizes the bill. Now let's look at a brief on what the current EIA that is in place, that was promulgated in 2006, what are those provisions, and what changes have been drafted in the new EIA 2020. Okay, so if you look at the applicability, the 2006 EIA has two categories of industries, category A and category B. The category A submits the EIA to the central government. Category B, industries go through an additional screening process before they're subcategorized into B1 and B2, where B1 submits the EIA to the state, and the B2 projects are exempt from an EIA process. Now, what is the EIA process? It is pretty elaborate. Every industry is asked to go through an elaborate environmental impact assessment that is then run through an expert appraisal committee, and this has to go through a public consultation period, and after which it gets finalized into they go through a no objection certificate, and it gets approved. So when your B2 projects are exempted from this entire elaborate process, though all of these projects are required to get a basic environmental permission. Now, regarding the public consultation period, that's one of the most important parts of the EIA process, where the public is asked to comment on the EIA, on the project that's being proposed. And it's the 30-day comment period, and after which there's a public hearing. Now, what are the changes that the EIA 2020 has proposed? So here we still have the category A industries as large industries. Now, category B1 and B2 have been separated, have been actually specified in the notification. B1, they still have to submit the EIA to the state, but the category B2, the number of industries that have come under category B2 have drastically increased, and all these do not need to go through any screening process, and they directly are exempt from getting an impact assessment. In addition, the public consultation period has reduced from 30 days to 20 days, with several projects being exempt from even getting a basic environmental permission. Okay, so this is an outlay of what the draft notification is, and we are going to use this as a basis to understand the different nuances in policy creation. So next slide, please. Yeah. So we're going to go through quick polls. So one of the things that the EIA 2020 has come up with is an ex post facto approval, which means that industries that have been operating without any environmental impact assessment will now be allowed to operate after paying a violator's fine. And the second one is a public comment period that we talked about. So I'm going to take a quick poll to get answers from you on who do you think would be the stakeholders impacted either positively or negatively by these two provisions. And we can just see the results really quick. All of you have overwhelmingly voted that the public will be impacted. Of course, the public will be negatively impacted with these legislations, and of course, industry. So I'm assuming all of you think the industry is going to be positively impacted. And then there are some nuisance makers that are also possible voters, but this is great. So moving on, we'll go through a case study to just demonstrate how complex this could get. So now, if you have a 10 megawatt thermal plant fired by biomass, as per the 2006 EIA, this would have needed to go through a screening process to be categorized between a B1 or a B2 category, whereas in the 2020 EIA, it would be automatically exempt. Now, just to look at both sides of the coin, a 10 megawatt power plant, imagine a 10 megawatt power plant coming up in a power deficient region, which, they're positioning themselves as renewable energy plant because they're using only biomass. and they're positioning themselves as being beneficial to the society. Now, how would that section, how would the society, and how would that industry view these changes in the regulations, the EIA regulations, as opposed to maybe somebody else who probably views it as, what if the power plant, once they get approval, changes their fuel from biomass to, say, municipal solid waste? What is stopping them from doing that? And if they are exempted from the EIA, then how do you actually monitor this, and how do you keep track of what's going on? So the reason I put this out there is for you to think of both sides of the coin, and all answers. I mean, if you're looking at from the lens of that particular stakeholder, every argument is correct, right? So you just need to look at it from that lens and understand that there needs to be a multi-stakeholder engagement in such an activity in order to come up with something that is truly implementable and in a fair manner. So talking of multi-stakeholder engagement, now we're going to go into the breakout rooms, and we'll have 4 stakeholder groups. We have the private industry, we have media, we have the government and the politicians, and we have the public. So I would like you to place yourself in those stakeholder shoes, put on that hat, and be guided of what you think is important to you as that stakeholder. These discussions will be guided by our facilitators, who will have introduced themselves in the breakout rooms. So before that, if you could go to your phones or open up another tab and go to menti.com, and you can wait for the code specific to your stakeholder group, that we're going to be running a few polls through that.
Here we are back in the main room. Rohan, how much time do we have?
We have roughly another 10 minutes, so you can take it ahead from here.
Okay. So we have 10 minutes. So folks, first of all, thank you for taking part and being such an interactive audience for this session. I think I literally think this is one of the most important topics of our time in our politics of environment, and not being included into what's happening means that we lose our voice. That being said, we have in this exercise split up the public and the attenders of the TEDxSusMafia into different stakeholders. Mine was politicians, Radhika's was the public, Arundhati's was companies, and Manjunath's was from the perspective of what responsible role can the Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at what our facilitators for these individual stakeholders took back from their interaction with you. So let me start with Arundhati. So she's dealing with companies. Were the companies very happy that they have this more sort of latitude? What are your feedbacks and insights?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting. First of all, most of the participants in the private industry cluster represented renewable energy. So, and a majority of them, for the question, do private industry body feel that the draft EIA 2020 is encouraging pollution? Majority of the participants did feel that yes, it was encouraging pollution or polluting companies. Now, to the open-ended questions of what feedback they can have for the ministry, we had some interesting responses. And first, participants did agree that it was a long-term loss and a short-term gain, and that the ministry needs to bring environment back to the narrative, which that seems underrepresented in the draft right now. And can there be a coexistence of environmental protection alongside development? That was very interesting. Majority of the participants felt that the government should have a framework to help polluting industries transition. So
awesome.
Yeah, it was very encouraging feedback indeed, Hari.
Yeah, I mean, this is superb. So first of all, we're understanding that the people who are here, who really represent the future of our country and our economy, people who want to change the world for the better, right? I know it's like a kind of like a selective audience, but
Yeah.
It's great that they wanted to be part of the clean tech sector, right? And I think even now if you would be a regular industry and you would be coal, right? Like coal is getting a worse and worse name, and everybody knows about climate change. Even the most hardcore industrialists cannot deny it, right? So why not be on the side of clean energy when it gives you the returns and so on and so forth? It's also very interesting that you mentioned that the government has to set up a framework for transitioning towards sustainability. Indeed, transitioning is not an easy task, and it requires a lot of support, including transition finance and so on and so forth. So thank you so much, Arundhati, and all your company peers for providing that insight. Okay, next we're going to go to Manju's perspective. Manju represents the media. Manjunath, do you have anything to say in terms of the role of the media in a responsible democracy as far as environmental governance is concerned?
Yeah, I was in the group, and we are supposed to be the devil's advocate in all issues. But as far as environment is concerned, unfortunately, the Indian media is not covering much, which actually pains me, being the same fraternity. The other problem is, again, it all depends on the revenue part of the whole media industry. Now the whole TRP issues are coming up, and so it's TRP is directly connected to the revenue. So that's what is driven the media, unfortunately. So I think the environmental issues are just put on the non-prime times and all. So not much of debates are happening, and not even programming is happening. That's what worries me, Hari. That's what made me to start the same.
Absolutely. I was just going to go there. So do you think that it might be that mainstream media is not this doesn't make money for mainstream media, therefore they will not report it, but they'll report a bunch of other stuff which does make money. Do you think that this creates room for independent media, which is reporting on sustainability and environment issues, and which is using its like low cost footprint and independence in order to report on the hard stuff, which the other media is not able to approach? And do you think there will be an audience for this based on your experience?
Yeah, I'm glad. Of late, the awareness on sustainability and environmental sustainability is increasing. Hari. A lot of people are realizing, okay, what have we done to the earth? The recent lockdown period, the air was clean, and the water, Yamuna River, and was clean, and so people realizing that, okay, yeah, the awareness has increased in general public. So media is also, in terms of they're also catching up with some of the issues with the environment sector. But there are other players which, especially now the digital platform, a lot of people are picked on the digital platform because it's easy to access, do the content, and a lot of writing and the video and graphics are coming up. So that way it's good. The whole transformation to digital, which is my own platform is on digital. So that way it is good to, the transformation is good. So people are doing a lot of stuff there.
I understand. So this is encouragement to anybody out there who's great at storytelling and who really feels passionately about these issues. I mean, we can't let things happen without us like documenting them and so on and so forth. So if you have the gift of storytelling and you care about communities and people and the implications of what's happening in our political economical sphere, right, which on these communities, do pick up your like you could write blog posts about it, you could make video narratives about it. There's a lot of room for independent media, and it's a huge gap in the thing, which I think maybe independent media and small media is the way to go for like having better reporting and better sort of spreading awareness to society. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now share my perspectives with the politicians group, and then I'll leave it to Radhika. And then if we have time, we'll take a question from the audience. So please do keep entering your questions in the chat. Rohan, if you see a good question, we'll take that as our last question and close out. Okay. So I was facilitating the politicians discussion, basically asking the question, you as a politician, why did you create this legislation, right? To serve whom? Overall, it came out that the reason they did this was because the politician believes that diluting the EIA is going to lead to better economic development, and the reason their political party got elected was because of economic development. There was a secondary reason which was also identified, which was perhaps to stay in power, one needs powerful friends, which are industries, and perhaps by doing this, the industries will become better friends with my political party. Okay, I had to say it. That was what came from the audience. But there were some other superb like insights as well. Like one was that companies themselves have started pivoting strategically towards cleaner production, so on and so forth, out of strategy, because we're in a world which is rapidly decarbonizing, and you don't want your supply chain to have stranded assets in it. For example, coal plants, while the rest of the world has transitioned. If a carbon tax suddenly gets applied, then worldwide, then it's going to have a huge impact on business, so on and so forth. Something else which came out of the discussion was that environment is not incentivized, quote unquote. And the way I understand this is that the externalities, as they call it, the costs of polluting and so on and so forth, are not being counted. So that negative incentive is not in place yet, but it could be from a carbon tax or from other mechanisms. So finally, the conclusion which we came to in our group was that politicians are not designing policy with environment in mind. They're using environment to serve economy instead of searching for like the other way to do it, because there's just not enough awareness in the masses, and therefore we have to look for ways to build awareness in the masses. We cannot rely on the education system. So maybe independent media, like Manjunath said, is the way to go. So I'm now going to hand over to Radhika. Radhika, I'm sorry, we have little time, but you could synthesize your insights from the public perspective. And if we have time for one question, we'll take it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Hari. So I think I had a very aware group of people in the public. So I think all of them knew that they were could participate in public policy, and some of them kind of knew but never ever explored how to do it. And the one thing that I think everybody was most people were in agreement of was there could be development side by side by safeguarding environment, and that it is important to look at environment in relation to development as well, and except that right now there is a little clarity on it. I mean, it's right now the current EIA, in the EIA perspective, it's very subjective, and more clarity is required. And what was interesting is how do you get information on this, and how can you get more clarity? I think social media came out quite a bit. So like when you talked about trying to get to the not the mainstream media, but go alternative media to get information. I think social media came out as one of the ways that you can get more information on policy and participate in policy framing, along with, of course, research and listening to experts and participating in discussions. Lastly, I think how do you participate in policy making? It is write to your representative, be part of focus group discussions, and make sure you actually proactively participate in some of these policy meetings. So that's what we want to do. And do we have any questions? We could.
Yeah, absolutely, Radhika. So I think that's the takeaway from one of the major takeaways of our session is the role of participation. I would also, so the question is, Garima is asking, how can that be done and accelerated? So how can participation be accelerated? I would also just add the framing question from, with the takeaway question from our side.
Right.
How can we have sustainable economic development for all within a thriving environment?
Right.
Okay, so Rohan, how much time do we have?
We have roughly another 2-3 minutes, maybe.
2-3 minutes. Right. So, yeah. So.
And I think I like, interestingly, Garima's comment was, it's difficult, especially in a time when ideas are poles apart and constructive conversations are not encouraged. I think, Manjunath may agree with me that, media has a huge role to play in that, trying to just disseminate information and, sort of solicit participation from the public.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're getting some good questions. Was very happy to hear opinions. The major challenge lies in engaging people, having counter views, especially when ideas are pulled apart. Absolutely. I would just say that one of the ways to engage is to, raise these provocative questions. I hope everybody here has had a great time. We're discussing a very, very serious issue, but I hope it was entertaining for you to join in on the polls and so on and so forth. And the takeaways from this session, we would hope as a team, is some questions which you can think of and ask other people and engage these other stakeholders who are poles apart by asking the hard questions which we feel that our society needs. Anybody else want to say something, or shall we close out? Okay. All right. So great. So let's close out. And Chandrasekharan, his comment is also well taken. He says solutions should be tailor-made based on the region's geographic and economic conditions. And this is very true. We cannot cut and paste or copy and paste from other people's solutions. We need sustainability problem solvers, and you'll find loads of them in the Mafia. So thank you everybody for the session, and I hand it over to Rohan and Anirudh.
Thank you so much for your time, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, policy team. That was a very, very insightful session, and I hope the breakout rooms also went well.